Emotions are often misunderstood, but emotions serve three critical purposes. It doesn't matter what the emotion is, they serve three purposes. One, emotions provide us existential feedback. So we evaluate the quality of our current living status by what we're feeling. So if we feel angry, that's what our life is. If we feel sad, that's what our life is. So emotions are giving us feedback to our quality of life. Now, every emotion that we feel has its own purpose, its own meaning. Sadness is the emotion in the face of loss. Anger is the emotion in the face of entitlement. Depression is the emotion that we use to retreat. So every emotion serves its own unique adaptive purpose. So one, it tells us how our life is going. Two, we use our emotions to communicate our need states to others by nonverbal expressions, right? And then the third purpose of emotions is emotions are the thing that gives our behavior energy. We don't do anything that isn't energized by an emotion. But most important, I think, is look at what is the feedback. What does the emotion tell you about life? So now if you ask me questions about, well, what does it mean to be sad? What does it mean to be angry? What we're looking at is the feedback dimension of that emotion. So sad. Sad is what we feel when we've lost something meaningful to us, right? Okay? Anxiety is the emotion we feel when there's something in our life that we need to take care of and we haven't taken care of it yet. Sometimes we know what it is that we need to take care of. Sometimes we don't know. But if you're feeling anxious, what it tells you is there's something out there that you need to take care of. Anger is the emotion we use to remove something that's in the way of what we feel entitled to. Does that make sense? So every emotion serves a unique purpose.
What about fear, guilt, and shame?
Absolutely. Fear is the emotion that tells us there's a threat to our physical safety and integrity. Anxiety tells us there's a threat to our psychological integrity. Fear says there's something out there that could potentially harm us. So it energizes us to do something to make ourselves safe. The problem with fear is sometimes we develop a fear response to things that aren't actually dangerous, and that's when it becomes a problem. But if a tiger was to come into this room, we wouldn't get angry, we would get fearful. But if I heard that there was potentially a tiger out in the neighborhood, I wouldn't get fearful, I'd get anxious. See the difference between those? Now, guilt is a wonderful emotion because guilt is the emotion we feel when we have violated a relationship rule. Okay? So if I'm in a relationship with somebody, there are certain rules that go with being in that relationship. A boyfriend, girlfriend agree that they don't see other people, right? Well, when you violate that relationship rule, you have an emotion that tells you you have violated it. And guess what the emotion is? Guilt, right? But the problem is sometimes people feel guilt not because they're truly remorseful, right? They feel guilt so they don't have to look at themselves as a bad person. If I lied and I cheated and I didn't feel guilty, what kind of person would I be? Not a very good person. But if I lie and I cheat and I feel guilty, and I tell you how guilty I feel, you have to conclude I may not be that bad a person. And I would convince myself I'm not that bad a person. So sometimes we feel guilt because we genuinely are sorry, but that's remorse. Sometimes guilt is a feeling that we have to justify our bad behavior and convince ourselves we're not as bad as our behavior would suggest. Now there's another emotion related to guilt and shame, and that's embarrassment. Embarrassment is the emotion that we experience when we have violated a social rule. Guilt is for relationship rules. Embarrassment is for social rules. For instance, here's a rule. You do not walk out of the bathroom with toilet paper stuck to your feet. All right? Now, what happens if you walk out of the bathroom with toilet paper stuck to your feet? Embarrassed. You're not supposed to tell bad jokes that nobody laughs at. So what do you feel when you tell a bad joke that nobody laughs at? Embarrassed, right? Now, the good news about embarrassment is we can recover from it. But a lot of people will end up avoiding all relationships because of their fear, their anxiety associated with embarrassment. They don't like embarrassment, so they never go out because they don't want to feel embarrassment. But everybody can recover from embarrassment.
Maybe we can recover from all our emotions, actually.
Actually, we can from all of them. And that's the critical issue. So that's a very good point. You asked about shame. Shame is similar to guilt, similar to embarrassment. But the difference is, with embarrassment, you have just done something that's unacceptable. Telling a bad joke or having your fly down, right? Okay, in the face of shame, you think that there is something about you as a person that other people would find objectionable. If people knew this about me, they would find me to be a lesser person and they would reject me. So in the face of shame, we tend to keep it hidden. And it often creates a great deal of anxiety because it makes us believe that there is something about us that is inherently unacceptable. But the thing is, everybody has some degree of that, because I like to remind people, everybody came into the world pooping on themselves and peeing on themselves. Everybody started there. So everybody has some inferiorities that they struggle with. So it's equal, right? But some people focus too much on that shame and allow it to limit their engagement with the rest of the world. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's when shame becomes sad.
So actually, what I understand is that shame really tells us that we feel that is something not wrong with us. So it gives us a message that we feel inferiority in that moment. Or in that.
We feel like there is something about us that if people knew about us, about it, they would find us unacceptable.
So what can we do with the message of the shame?
Well, this is where courage is so important. But what I would tell people who are struggling with shame is we're all struggling with inferiority. There's nobody out there that has life completely mastered, right? So you are one among the rest of us. So now what it takes is courage. And courage is the willingness to move forward in life despite shame and embarrassments and fears and anxiety. So what life requires more than anything else is courage. And it's really the courage to be imperfect, because we're so afraid of going out and embarrassing ourselves, doing something stupid, being made to look silly, right? Nobody gets it right all the time. Everybody on occasion looks silly. Everybody on occasion does something embarrassing. Don't let the fear of that limit you. And in fact, it tends to be true that for most of us, our life is going well. Only about 20% of the time is it going really well. Most of the time we're dealing with anxiety and fear and, apprehension. That's the norm. So don't let your being in your own human way normal limit you. Find the courage to keep moving your life forward despite the apprehensions that come with all of these emotions.
What do you feel about the difference of knowing something and feeling something, or about knowing that I've had an emotion before that I didn't felt at the time and feeling it?
Well, knowing it sort of means that I can explain it in words, right? And that's not the only way of knowing it. The other way of knowing something is feeling it. And what I like to point out to people is that we were feeling emotions and using emotions to drive our behavior, to evaluate our life, to express our needs to other people many years before we had a vocabulary to explain it. So emotions come first. Our means of communicating with other people was first done emotionally, by crying to express need, anger expressed to communicate discontent, and smiling and cooing to invest engagement. So we were using emotions to know about our life many years before we had the words necessary. And we can grow into adults and have an intuitive knowledge that is emotional that we can't actually put our words to, right? And there is a whole level of intuitive knowledge in the human experience that escapes our verbal explanation. We feel it, but we can't yet explain it. From an Adlerian psychology perspective, that's the unconscious. The unconscious are the intuitive rules that guide our choices that we don't yet have the words to fully appreciate and explain. And so to me, that's the difference between feeling, which is really being activated by my unconscious, nonverbal experiences, and then we have the knowing, which are the things that I can explain in words.
Where do you think that stress comes from when feeling an emotion like fear or shame or guilt or embarrassment or the other so-called negative emotions, so-called? The stress comes from the emotion or from fighting the emotion because we want to repress it somehow because I don't know why.
Well, stress is the emotion. Stress is an experience in life that tells you need to make an adjustment. That's what stress is, all right? So stress is the signal that says you need to do something differently. Now, what's the nature of the stressful signal? Well, that means, is it anxiety? Is it fear? Is it guilt? Is it embarrassment? And if we pay attention to the stressful emotion, it tells us the nature of the adjustment we need to make. But that's what stress is, the indication that you need to adjust. And let me say that there aren't positive and negative emotions. There are emotions we like and emotions we don't. They're all positive. And the reason they're all positive is because they tell you what you need to do. Now, in terms of classifying emotions, I argue for thinking of emotions as validating emotions, the ones that tell you life is good. Joy, happiness, love, right? Contentment, satisfaction. These are the emotions that we work for, that tell us life is good. Well, that's where we want to get to. But the problem is life is demanding. Life is challenging. 80% of our day is spent just dealing with the challenges of life. And those challenges say you need to adjust. You need to do something. That's stress. And that's a compelling emotion. Now, what a compelling emotion is the emotion that when you experience it, you are motivated to do something to make it stop, right? So that you can get back to the good feelings, all right? So these compelling emotions are stress, and they come in a variety of different types. Anxiety says there's something you need to take care of. Go take care of it, or decide it doesn't need to be taken care of. Anger says you feel like you're entitled to something. Are you? You may not be. And even if you are entitled to it, is throwing a fit the best way to get it? Maybe you need to come up with some different strategies. If the stress comes up and you feel overwhelmed, you may retreat into a depression. So every emotion tells you the nature of the stress.